It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. I'm a long time fan of your work, and great to be able to chat with you about two exciting projects. Must be nice after COVID to have a couple of things like this to get out there and be able to talk about again.
I like bosses, man, this job. Do you know what I mean? Nothing for ages, and then two or three of them show up at the same time. You're like, oh, okay, great. But happy to be working, and yeah, it's an exciting time to be driving down Sunset Boulevard. I think there's a few billboards of mine on Sunset Boulevard, which is always fun.
Oh, awesome. And I wanted to start off by talking with you about Moriarty's The Devil's Game, because I listened to a couple of episodes and really interesting dynamic in there. I think particularly as obviously Moriarty's a character typically portrayed as maybe the Joker to Sherlock Holmes's Batman. So what's it been like for you to shake up that dynamic and to put a new spin on this character we haven't really seen before, I think it's fair to say?
Yeah, you want to try and make your characters as real as possible. And the thing about Moriarty, in the Doyle books is, he is the master villain. And sometimes the master villain can come across as a little two-dimensional, a little dastardly. And we don't want to know too much about him because we want to know about Sherlock. And he ends up being, just someone that isn't a real person. So for me, I want him to feel real. What does he, what does he wear to work? What's his favorite food? What's his favorite mode of transport? All that kind of stuff. So, this is a man who clearly is a brilliant mind like Holmes, great mathematician, great chess player, very curious about life, very good at solving problems. But, he's on the end of a couple of injustices, which end up with him being incarcerated. And, that might turn any man angry and bitter. And then you've got someone who's angry and bitter and highly intelligent. So he's a fun character, and someone that in that backdrop of the Sherlock Holmes London, which is charismatic and an interesting thing to kind of mine into, you've got a very dynamic character that really hasn't had anywhere near as much of a magnifying glass on him as Sherlock has.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously we mentioned COVID there. It has restricted so much over the past couple of years. So were you able to get into a recording booth with your co-stars to work with them? And either way, what was it like for you to obviously reunite with Billy Boyd on this project? Something I know has excited a lot of your Lord of the Rings fans.
I kind of demanded that Billy be there, like pulled rank, and, because obviously outside of maybe a few scenes with my wife, almost all of the scenes that I do, if I'm with someone else in a scene, is with Billy, my partner. And, we were able to make an offer to Billy to play this role, which he was happy to do, which is great. Billy and I do a podcast every week together called The Friendship Onion. So I was able to kind of pitch it to him. And it was great. It's important to try and have people in the recording booth with you so that when you're doing the scenes, you're actually doing it too someone, and that helps. So it's great to be back in the saddle again with Billy making a show, and fingers crossed we can continue to explore that if we do a season 2.
Yeah, well, I really hope so. And I know you have done voice roles before, including obviously Call of Duty Vanguard, which I thought was really awesome, different role for you. But what is it about these type of projects you enjoy, and particularly with The Devil's Game? Something about this that excites you as an actor, that you go in the recording booth and very different type of performance for you?
Yeah, it's quite kind of old fashioned. I did a radio play when I was probably 18 or 19 called Stockport So Good They Named It Twice. Which I think was on Radio 2 or Radio 4. And, that format of going into these little booths and only being able to deliver or capture your voice is something that's kind of fun for me, kind of harkens back to those old iconic radio shows that, we listened to as kids, Monty Python on the radio, or the Goons, or War of the Worlds and stuff like that. Can we create drama? Can we kind of color that world so good that it jumps off the page? I've been driving around Los Angeles for the last 3 or 4 days listening to it, and to hear the kind of cobblestones of London and Big Ben chiming, and that very kind of iconic English city is kind of charming and in a fun way jarring when you drive around California. It's all the same for me in terms of acting. I don't make a huge distinction between doing a TV show or a film or a podcast or a radio play or anything like that. It's just am I interested in this character? Can I make this character real? Do I want to tell the stories of this character? And I just think Moriarty is at the very least understood, and maybe at the most he's someone that we need to take a closer look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I've loved everything that I've heard from the series so far. I started it today, planning to finish it later. But I did something that stood out to me outside the show is that mock-up they've done, obviously, of you, Phil, and Lindsay as these characters. And I can't help but think, looking at that, how great it would be to see you guys play this in a live action setting, whether it be TV, film, even theatre. So is that something you'd like to do? Or, like you said, maybe just focus on a season 2 of obviously going down the podcast route?
Well, you're always keen to explore those things any way that we can, get more people exposed to that world that we're creating would be fun. I think the poster looks great too, and looks like a movie or looks like a TV show already. So maybe Audible will be under pressure to do that. I always like working in different mediums, and this has been a great kind of thing to do. Doing another season of this would be fantastic, but maybe at some point one of those seasons turns into something that you can actually see. That time in London is relatively expensive because you're going back into a different period, but in success it's always something that you can work out.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like the right time for it as well, because there is very much a gap in the market. Obviously, the BBC Sherlock has sort of ended with those actors being busy, and the Robert Downey Jr. version seems to have stalled. So I think putting that spotlight on Moriarty could be exactly what we need now in terms of a film in particular.
Yeah, I agree.
And of course, another very intriguing project you're working on, Moonhaven. Loved the first 2 episodes I've seen. And I am curious, so after starring in something like Lost, what's it been like to go back to that high concept sort of sci-fi world with a lot of mysteries? And based on what I've seen so far, a lot of twists and turns in this show as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important not to close any doors on your career. And, I never say that I would never do something, that's even slightly similar to something that you've done previously. There are big high concepts in this show, and obviously I'm sure you can find mirrors to Lost in there, but I mean, for me, the character that I play in Moonhaven is dramatically different from the character that I played in Lost. He's kind of idealistic and a little naive about how the world works, and you're watching him change before your eyes by being exposed to people that live on Earth as opposed to on the moon. But, again, it's like with Moriarty, the way that I approach it is, can I make these people real? Am I interested in making them real? What do they wear when they go to sleep at night? What's their favorite lunch? How do they walk? How do they talk? All those kind of things. And with Paul, I thought it would be fascinating to watch a guy who has all these kind of highfalutin, idealistic ideas about humanity be consistently dashed the more that he is exposed to modern day people who come from Earth.
Yeah, and Paul is such an interesting character. As you say, he's very much trying to protect this outsider, and obviously finding himself dealing with the politics of Moonhaven, and obviously how the people feel about those back on Earth and things like that. But what specifically about him did you connect with? And have you had any thoughts about where you'd maybe like to take him down the line should that show continue as well?
I like one of the major ideas of the show, which obviously Paul believes in, which is the future is better. It sounds a little cheesy to say that, but it is a notion. It's like Lenin's quote about, war is over if you want it. And, when he extrapolated that, he just said, look, it sounds silly and it sounds like something that you can dismiss out of hand, but it is as simple as just kind of saying, okay, we're just going to stop fighting each other now. And the idea about the future is better is it's the initial step down a path of positivity that is the only way that we'll be able to solve these problems that we're experiencing on Earth. You can't have a stance of giving up or negativity about things because you've lost already. You need to be able to be confident in this idea of, yes, we are the animal that's made a mess of this planet, but that also means that we're the animal that can fix it. And it begins with a mindset. So I like this mindset, and I'm keen to kind of maintain that mindset with Paul for a while until maybe he gets exposed to something that completely breaks his world, and then we see someone's major ideals about how he's been brought up be kind of fractured.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, Paul and Bella's partnership is clearly going to be a key part of this show. So, what was it like working with Emma Mcdonald's, especially when she's something of a relative newcomer, particularly with a project, I think, as high concept as this?
Yeah, man, it's weird because, I'm 45 now, so I've been working, since I was 18. So, 25 years plus type thing. And you still always feel like or at least I always feel like a newcomer. I like to approach my work that way, that everything's refreshing and everything's there to learn on set, which it is. There's always something that you can learn as an actor through the job that you do, or from other actors, So I'm not in a position where I feel like I'm in a teaching moment. I'm always in a learning moment. But I think, as fellow English people, we probably bonded on, what it means to live in England and what we miss about England. And Emma had a lot of questions about California, where I live, and Los Angeles and how that city works, and what it means to be involved in a successful TV show, hopefully. So we chatted a lot about that, and we do have this kind of brother sister vibe in the characters where they kind of rub up against each other in different ways because of the way that they live their life, but they're also learning as characters a lot about themselves and each other. So it was always fun to do those scenes.
Yeah, well, loving what I've seen so far. And just on another note for a second, obviously we got that Lord of the Rings TV series coming up in a couple of months, and they actually dropped a new trailer a few hours ago. But I'm curious for your thoughts on what's it like to see a franchise that is so cinematic, and obviously was a big break for you in Hollywood with your first movie role, make that jump to streaming. How do you feel about that?
I think it's fine. I mean, that's where, the whole way that we get our content is going. And, I think if you had tried to make these Peter Jackson series of films now, some of them pushing into 3 hours and 20 minutes type thing for the extended editions, people would say we can't do that. We just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So I think nowadays people want slightly more bite-sized chunks of their content. I'm the same, so it's great to watch creatives kind of handle that world in a different way. And I wish them luck with it. And, I'm sure I'll be watching it and talking about it on my podcast with Billy Boyd that I do.
Yeah, well, definitely. I'll be interested in seeing you guys do some watch-alongs there. But of course, another big franchise you're a part of, getting to be in the Rise of Skywalker with Star Wars. So, what was your take, obviously, coming out of that, on seeing the response to that film? And obviously, I feel like there was a lot we didn't see. I know you've talked in other interviews, a lot of your scenes, the nature of the beast of the movie like that, maybe didn't make the final cut. But what was it like for you to come out the other side of that experience? Because it must have been a hell of a thing to go off into that Star Wars world, even just for that one movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the Star Wars franchise is extraordinary and, really molding in terms of the modern day industry of making films, certainly in the West. So hugely influential to be involved in something like that. And the reason that I became an actor, was Star Wars. So it was great to kind of come full circle. I had a blast. I mean, I'm really good friends with JJ, and I'd been giving him a hard time for a while to put me in Star Wars. And then we eventually figured something out. It's great to be on set with those kind of iconic characters. And it was a really fun experience for me. I think I'm always supportive of JJ's work because, he's someone who I've seen up close working on set, and he's, about as talented as anyone else. I think Star Wars has been found by new generations of people since the first ones have come out, and has spawned a whole bunch of new fans. I mean, we've been going to these conventions over the past few months or so, and the appetite for Star Wars seems about as strong as it's ever been. So it's a fun galaxy to hang out in, and who knows, maybe at some point they'll tell more stories of the character that I play, and I can do it again.
Yeah, well, I was going to say on that note, obviously we talked about Lord of the Rings going down the streaming route. We've seen Star Wars do that as well. So it feels like there are opportunities for your character to return. So I'm guessing you would be keen on that. Or would you just be satisfied seeing him maybe pop up in some of these Marvel comics they're doing and the novels and all these other things as well?
I mean, he has done that. I've been told by a lot of people online that he's featured in a lot of these new comics, these new Star Wars graphic novels, and these new just actual normal novels about the Star Wars canon. So Beaumont, my character that I play, is still alive and well and doing his thing. Be great to show up, be great to do something. I think quite rightly, the Star Wars universe is now telling more stories of women, more stories of people from different cultures and different backgrounds. Maybe they're done with telling stories of mid-40-year-old white guys, but I'm always available if they're interested.
Well, fingers crossed. And going way back a second, you also got a taste, obviously, of the Marvel Universe in X-Men Origins Wolverine way back in 2009. So how do you look back at that experience? And obviously, with the way superhero movies have exploded since then, is that something you'd like to return to? Or do you prefer these projects like the ones we're talking about today, which are maybe a little smaller and maybe give you a different challenge as an actor?
I don't mind. You never say no. Closing a door on anything in this business, it makes no sense because there's always so many opportunities. I had a great time doing that film, and like you said, it was kind of pre the explosion of Marvel. I mean, there is a version of Deadpool in there, but it's a Deadpool that you wouldn't expect. But it is still Ryan Reynolds, and it's the first time that we see Ryan Reynolds, working with that character. I was over in Sydney. My friends were living in Sydney, so I got a chance to spend some time with them, working with Hugh Jackman and Will.i.am and Ryan Reynolds, all like really lovely people. And, got a chance to kind of ask Hugh Jackman about his workout routine. And that was kind of fascinating. He was an absolute gentleman and a beast. I love Australia. I love Sydney. I've had some of my favorite days on the planet in and around the city of Sydney. And it was a really fun thing. And again, embraced by the people that loved it. And I'm not in it all the time, but people seem to universally think that my character should have been in the film more, and that he ended up being pretty cool.
Absolutely. And it feels like, everyone is jumping into superhero movies these days. But when I was looking back, obviously, at the Lord of the Rings movies, it feels like a lot of the cast from those haven't necessarily gone down that commercial blockbuster route. Obviously done fantastic projects, but not necessarily going into something superhero related. So do you think a part of that is you guys just had such a one of a kind experience working with Peter Jackson over in New Zealand that maybe nothing will live up to that? Or are you finding that you're just looking for a project that's similar to that or just different?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think probably there's some people that worked in Lord of the Rings who just don't have the taste for graphic novel films and those kind of superhero things. And then, some people have just, got close and maybe it didn't work out for them. I think there's an oversaturation of the market at this point. And so there's some good superhero films and there's some bad ones. And, I think there's probably more bad ones than good, so maybe people have a little reluctance to get involved with it. We were spoiled with Peter Jackson, and you'll never do a job as good as that, so it's tough to have those high standards. But like I said, in your career you can never say no to anything, and I'm sure at some point in the future I'll do something that's a little bit more Marvel orientated.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. And just one final question for you. You mentioned yours and Billy's podcast. So just want to give you the chance to maybe, if you want to tell our readers a little bit about where they can find that and what sort of content they can expect from what you guys are doing each week together.
Yeah, it's called The Friendship Onion. It comes out every week, wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch it on YouTube. If you subscribe to us, it's really helpful. It allows us to make more and more shows. It's a crazy thing about the podcasting world. If you're not consistently building an audience, then sooner or later you have to stop doing it. That's just the business model. And we like doing the show, but if we get to a point where we're plateauing in terms of subscriptions, then sooner or later we have to stop doing it. And then we'll spend the rest of our life being moaned at by people, and we'll say, well, we warned you guys, we told you guys. So we'll see what happens with that. There's no particular format at all, really. Billy and I just sit around and talk nonsense. I mean, Billy's the best person for me that I've found that I can talk nonsense with and keep the conversation flowing. So on any given week, we just talk nonsense. Last week we had someone who came on who made mead, this alcohol made of honey. And we every so often we talk a little bit about Lord of the Rings, but more often than not, it's just how's your week gone? Talk about silly things that made us laugh. And time flies when you're having fun,
Yeah, well, it sounds awesome. Just like The Devil's Game and Moonhaven, two projects really happy to help people get to if they haven't already. And like I said, Dominic, big fan of your work. So such a pleasure to be able to speak to you about those and some of your past projects today as well. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. It was nice to talk to you too. And I hope you have a nice weekend.
You too. Cheers. Great to meet you.
Easy. Nice to meet you too. Bye.